The Curmudgeon Rock Report. Curmudgeon rhymes with bludgeon. Rock gods do it right. So do rock nerds. We're here for the rock. 1965, 2021, doesn't matter. Crude, rude, yet somehow sophisticated. Welcome. Enjoy the show.
This is Christopher O'Connor, and you are listening to the latest voyage of the Curmudgeon Rock Report. Very proud of what we've accomplished so far. This is episode number 11. We may not be the adventure zone yet, but we are building a worldview, link by link, chain by chain. And I think we're doing some good stuff here along the path to rock nerd dumb, as in very dumb. Anyway, say hello, Arturo Andrade from Gwangju, South Korea.
Yes, hello. And things are good here. And we have a very special guest for today's episode. Before we even introduce the episode, I'd like to introduce the guest. This is my very good friend here in South Korea. He is a fellow music obsessive. And we're very, very happy and pleased and thankful to have him on. This is Mr. Chan Hyeon Park. Say hello, Chan Hyeon.
Hello, everyone.
Yes, and we'll talk a little bit, but good to hear your voice, Chan Hyeon. And I know that a few of you may be asking yourself, why is Arturo's good buddy from Korea, who is an actual real life Korean, why is he on this podcast? The answer to that will become very evident here in a few minutes. Welcome to the Parallel Universe. The Parallel Universe is where Arturo and I, and now Chan Hyeon is along for the ride. This is where we contemplate what life would look like in a rock and roll pop music world that made any damn sense. And the good stuff was in the stadiums and on the radio, and the artists that are actually doing all of the groundbreaking work, or most of it. Let's not knock the Taylor Swifts and the Coldplays too hard, but, and the Bruno Mars. But in this parallel universe, like, Kurt Weill is the president of the United States, for example. And so on that note, let us get our spaceship hats on and play some Johann Strauss. And Arturo, tell me, what are you listening to this week in the parallel universe?
Let's talk about a very, very new young band that just recently put out their debut album. This is a band called Squid, and their debut album is called Bright Green Field. Now they put out a couple of singles during the past couple of years. However, this is their debut album. And the British music hype machine is notorious for going on overdrive, hyping sorely overrated bands without much staying power. However, recently their collective lips have sucked on the collective asses of mediocrity, such as the same sounding ham-fisted bombast of Idols and the cliche, generic, predictable pretty boy Strokesian indie rock of Fontaine's DC. However, one band that in the past couple of years has justifiably gotten the UK music press's feathers in a ruffle is this Brighton-based quintet known as Squid. Now, they've been classified, if you will, as part of a new wave of British post-punk tinged progressive rock that includes other bands such as Black Midi and Black Country New Road. While as technically talented as the latter two bands are, they are nowhere near as exciting, interesting, original, or downright engaging, catchy, and funky as Squid, who might very well be, or very well should be, the breakout band of the bunch. Imagine mid-1970s King Crimson and early Talking Heads having a bastard child with the tortured, barking anger of the Jesus Lizards' David Yao on vocals. That's pretty much what they sound like. The vocals are actually done by the drummer and band leader, Ollie Judge. Yes, they have a singing drummer. We don't get many of those anymore.
Where's Don Henley?
Yeah, or Phil Collins, right? So you get that comparison I just made, then add strong underpinnings of hard funk and spacey krautrock soaring over it, and you get a good idea of what Squid are like. Finally, throw in lyrical touches reflecting socioeconomic despair and political angst at the rise of the far right, delivered with gritty impressionism. The above-mentioned David Byrne and his paranoid, neurotic, lyrical persona is a big influence here, again. Highlights include the sharp, angular funk workout of narrator, whose mid-song slowdown then builds up into an orgasmic conclusion. You have Boy Racers with its clipped, sharp, motorique groove that midway through dissolves into a doom-laden synth drone, not unlike the intro to Led Zeppelin's In the Light, and the multi-segmented Pamphlets, which goes from hypnotic bass-led groove to increasingly intense guitar synth-entwined washout, with singer Judge complaining that he doesn't go outside anymore because he's tired of seeing pamphlets distributed by far-right nationalist groups. If this all sounds like righteous rock and roll that everyone should get behind, that's because it is. Go check Squid out.
I'm trying real hard. I think I made it up. Flushing out your face with the features from a magazine. One slow sequence just to find my feet. 10 toes, I've got 5 on each. Losing my flow and my memories are so unnatural. I am my own narrator.
Chris, I think you checked them out just recently.
Yeah, I have checked out Squid, and I agree with your assessment of their influences and also the excitement. This is a very exciting first listen. I would be remiss if I didn't mention that I immediately spotted LCD Sound System as perhaps a pretty strong influence on them. There's a lot of, and granted, we all know, and most of us can make that connection, that James Murphy himself was inspired by Byrne. And so there's a little bit of that paranoia, but the danciness of it, the funk, and not only that, but that there's a kind of a mesmerizing, like the longer songs have this sort of mesmerizing beat and build up to it. It reminds me of some of the stuff from Sound of Silver. So I do see this band as, like you said, that a lot of the British press, and they've been doing this for 25 years, they love everyone when they first come out. But 80% of what they love is vapid, but not these guys. These guys actually, I always say that if they hit you in the mush, if it feels like they're blasting you in the mush when it comes out of the speaker, that's a good album. So for a guy who professes not to know much about rock and roll, Mdou Mokhtar sure does rock. Mokhtar, a native of Niger's perpetually battle-torn Tuareg region, is the foremost and brightest shining star rising out of the Sahel regional desert blues scene. He's a left-handed, self-taught guitar god of the highest order. Mokhtar recently only discovered the music of Eddie Van Halen, according to press reports, and he arguably is already on par with Eddie as a fret tapper. This is only one of a number of brilliant techniques, tones, and moods on display from Mokhtar and his eponymous band's newest record, Afrique Victime. This is Mokhtar's maiden voyage backed by an American record label after years of self-released or under-the-radar releases. This record may enjoy some crossover success here in the U.S., but not in an ironic hipster way. This truly is a mesmerizing body of work. I've seen reviews and articles about Mokhtar that refer to his music as psychedelic rock, which to me is a lazy descriptor from writers who've probably done a few too many drugs in their lives. The label probably comes from an admiration of Mokhtar's prodigious skills as a soloist. This dude can certainly shred and tap magic out of all of his pedals, as he does here on album opener Chiz Meetin, and the title track, which may become a rallying cry for revolutionaries across Africa, with translated lyrics that shoot bullets at neo-colonial France like these. The wind born in Tunisia spread all over Arabia. Africa is a victim of so many crimes. If we stay silent, it will be the end of us. Why is this happening? What is the reason behind this? Yet the brightest and most fascinating musical passages on Afrique Victime are its gentlest, or at least its most synergistic. The pretty, passion-infused harmonies and balladry of Tala Tanem, the amped-up exotic rhythms, percussive claps, supple acoustic guitar notes, and chants of the album closer Bismillahi Ataga, the slithering bass line that ties the hypnotic Ya Habibti together. Indeed, much of this album is acoustic communal music, a kind of an indigenous folk driven by a masterful songwriter, arranger, and craftsman. The album was largely recorded during one-off sessions while the band was on tour in 2019 to support Mokhtar's breakthrough through Indo-Western consciousness, the rock balls quality Ilana the Creator. That may explain why the album oscillates so organically in mood between wistful, celebratory, and agitated. It's an understandable mix of emotions for Mokhtar. Life in Niger in general, and in Mokhtar's Tuareg region, is not easy. As it has been for more than a century, the aggression, insurgencies, civil wars, and anti-colonialism, that last part includes the US as well as France, all centers around the mining of uranium and the desire to control it or share in its wealth. The never-ending cycle of violence and cultural inertia experienced by Mokhtar's nomadic Tuareg ancestors and peers clearly fills the musician with rage that simmers underneath the galloping regional grooves and razor-sharp soloing of the song Afrique Victime. While the rest of the album is written and sung in Mokhtar's native Tuareg language, Afrique Victime is boldly sung in French. It's a fight song for all of Africa. It honors Mandela, it condemns Gaddafi, and it has that jousting line about Tunisian wins. The final result is an intense 9-song, 41-minute rumble of an album that takes us on a tour through Mokhtar's soul. This may be the best album I'll hear all year. It certainly will be one of the most important. Mdou Mokhtar has a musical vocabulary that deserves to be heard widely.
I think it's important to understand also where he comes from. He's from Niger, but he's part of the Tuareg people. The Tuaregs are a civilization of people. They are basically desert inhabitants, and
very nomadic. Basically desert gypsies.
Yeah, they're basically desert gypsies, and they span all throughout northern and western Africa, particularly Libya, Algeria, Niger, and Mali, and Burkina Faso as well.
Yes.
And one of the interesting things about Mokhtar, not just being a great guitar player and musical artist, he's also an actor. Back in 2015, there was a film, an independent film, directed by a guy named Christopher Kirkley, who owns a small record label that specializes in West African desert music, if you will. And Sahel Sounds is the name of the record label. And the movie is called Akaunak Tedalat Taha Tazaukai. Basically translates to rain, the color of blue with a little red in it. Yes, purple rain.
Yep.
The film is essentially a remake of Prince's 1984 Purple Rain, with Mokhtar playing the Prince part. And the reason it has such a convoluted title is because in the Tuareg language, which is called Tamashek, there is no word for the color purple. That word doesn't exist in the language, so they have to give it this title. And the film, like I said, is an homage and kind of a recreation of Prince's Purple Rain, with Mokhtar's own personal biographical story thrown in there a little bit. And the film got really positive reviews and won a few awards at some international film festivals. And that's what the movie actually is what got people really into Mdao Mokhtar, and which led to the breakthrough of his 2019 album, Milana the Creator.
We now leave the parallel universe and come back into our universe. And like we said at the beginning of the episode, we have a guest, Chan Hyeon Park, who lives there in Gwangju, South Korea, with Arturo. So Arturo, what the hell is he doing on this broadcast with us?
Well, the reason he's here is that aside from being a big rock music fan like us, he's also quite knowledgeable about Korean music and its history. And what we're focusing on today is, believe it or not, K-pop. Now, for the past decade, K-pop has become a dominant force in popular music, with several acts, if you will, such as Psy and BTS, breaking through in big ways in the Western market. In fact, the K-pop genre's march to worldwide popularity has been kind of fermenting for quite a long time, and it's been a gradual process since the 1990s. And now for us two, you and I, Chris, curmudgeons, and other crusty old rock fans out there, we just don't fucking get it.
No, we don't.
Chris has never been a fan of mechanized, inauthentic, vapid, pre-processed pop. I, for one, have always thought and still think K-pop is at best a bad imitation of bad Western pop music, at worst robot music for zombies to dance to. Nevertheless, on this episode, the curmudgeons are going to try and open their minds, and we're going to try and get down to the bottom of this K-pop revolution. And like I mentioned earlier in the episode, our guest is our good friend, Mr. Chan Hyeon Park. Like I said, a music geek enthusiast like the both of us, and a native Korean with a very strong knowledge of Korean music, its history, and its trends. And most importantly, he will try to provide context and the history of K-pop, in order to help us understand why and how this genre continues to appeal to so many people.
Absolutely. And so we appreciate that. And just as an aside, in honor of Paul Mooney, who just died this week, we're going to colloquially call this section "Ask a Korean Dude." If you want to get to the heart of the matter of Korean music, don't leave it to a first generation American Cubano from Miami and some half Irish kid from Syracuse, New York. You got to go straight to the source. So Chan Hyeon, the hopes of an entire nation rest on your shoulders. Prince Rogers Nelson was born on June 7th, 1958. He grew up in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Michael Jackson was born on August 29th, 1958. He grew up in Gary, Indiana, roughly 450 miles southeast of Minneapolis. Both men released their debut albums in the late 1970s. By 1982, they were both super-duper stars. Yes, the parallels between two of popular music's brightest shining stars are pretty eerie. Arturo and I will soon begin dissecting the brilliance of both men in an ongoing series of episodes we've dubbed Prince vs. Michael. Why the name? Because I have the audacity to defend the legacy of Michael as greater than that of Prince's, and Arturo has the audacity to argue the exact opposite. Before we get going, where do you stand? Zap your thoughts to us at curmudgeonrock@gmail.com.
So, Chan Hyun, let's tell us a little bit about yourself and your relationship to music and the music you generally like and your relationship to K-pop.
Okay, my name is Chan Hyeon Park, and I'm 28 years old, 27 in American age. And I mostly listen to new metal, unlike Arturo. I mean, Arturo here despises new metal, but for me,
most new metal. Most.
I
most
don't.
new metal.
I honestly, I don't. But go ahead. Go ahead.
I mean, to each to their own. I mean, like, I was gonna explain this, preference. My preference of new metal is derived from the fact that there were no alternatives in my early age. I mean, like, I grew up with K-pop, but they were not appealing to me in any way in shape or form. So I resorted myself to listening to some sort of some 41s, Still Waiting, and Bullets Over My Head, and some songs like that you guys probably never heard of. But I really dug myself into that kind of culture, and that's part of the reason why I was so invested in musical industry and Western culture in general. But like I said, I grew up with K-pop, so I know what the K-pop is. I know what the deal is, so I can briefly, or maybe extensively, if you guys want to, and tell you guys what the K-pop is all about. So
find a middle ground between briefly and extensively, and just kind of give us the half secret inside dope, and give us your take.
So basically, what we're going to start with first, Chan Hyeon, tell us first around what we now know as K-pop. Give us like the year or the time frame when it started to emerge. The music that we now know as K-pop, when it started busting out, and then go backward. Tell us what the music scene, the popular music scene in Korea, what was it like before K-pop?
So before K-pop, it was more of a love songs and some guitar bands, and there was a genre called trot, and it was a mixture of Korean folk songs and some sort of love song. I mean, American influence was largely at hand. I mean, we were occupied by the American, military back then. Like, I'm talking about early 1950s and 60s and things like that. We were still in shambles, and there wasn't that much of a cultural influence to begin with. So we were mostly got influenced by American, culture and pop music. But at the same time, we wanted to invent the new wheels. So we developed this genre called trot. So that's pretty much what we had back then, back in early days of, so-called K-pop. But when it really took off is, I should say, 1992 to 2000. Early 2000, that's when most of the boy bands such as G.O.D, you guys never heard of that that band before, and Seotaeji, it's not exactly a band, but I digress. It was actually a band back in 1990s, but they separate their ways, and Seotaeji, being the main guy himself, started doing the solo and things like that. Anyway, that's when the K-pop really took off, and a lot of people, with the economic growth and cultural evolution, and because of the Han River miracle, we were really going forward with the cultural evolution and things like that.
Yeah, for those who don't know, the Han River miracle is basically a phrase used to describe the Korean economic boom in the 1980s that basically resulted in Seoul getting the Olympics in 1988. And from like starting in the early 80s, Korea just exploded economically. Hyundai and Samsung became major presences in the automobile and electronics markets. And that kind of affected Korean pop culture as well, because Koreans started to get more of a positive encouragement of themselves as a society and as a people. And I imagine that kind of fed into the pop music and into the birth of K-pop. Like, this is our music.
Right.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I mean, like you said, because, after what happened the Douglas MacArthur rampage of the 50s and 60s, and the splitting of the two countries. I imagine, like you said, talk about identity politics. That's identity politics to the nth. Really needing your own thing. So no, that's cool. I never really thought about that. So great.
Yeah.
So
these early K-pop groups, I think, why did so many people start liking this music, and how did its popularity kind of like spread? Like,
I want to get to the meat of that first, because I should say this: sex sells, and the heavy monetization of sexual theme back in the day was kind of thing, and it's largely due to the fact that we got democratized. I mean, am I saying it correctly?
Yeah, you are.
Yeah. After we became a democratic nation, the government crackdown has been laxed quite a bit, and women weren't able to wear miniskirts or hot pants or things like that. It was illegal to do so back in 1970s and 80s and even early 90s. But after the democratization, the government stopped cracking down on those kind of things, and musical industry grew up with that, because there was no crackdown or anything at all to stop them. So they were really, really digging into this kind of, first they were trying to, get the creative mind going, and, try to come up with the, critical standpoint of view when it comes to, political, agenda and things like that. But soon they delved into the monetization of sex and things like that, because at the end of the day, money is what matters when it comes to labels and things like that happened. Yeah, boys digging girls and girls digging feminine boys is what happened back then, back in 1990s and early 2000. And I'd like to give you an example. Like, for example, the military guys, enlistees in Korea. You guys remember the fact that, in South Korea, young men get, drafted against their will?
Well, basically, in Korea, you have mandatory military service for all men, for all boys, really.
But that's like most of the world these days. I mean, yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, except us. I mean, we're like the only like voluntary military, I think, in the world.
The British, the British.
Yeah, and the British is voluntary too.
Several other European.
But like Israel and other countries, they have the whole mandatory.
Well, in Israel, both men and women have to do military service.
There you go.
In Korea, it's just the males.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, but we're in the process, and I might have to, digress. But we were in the talks of, including women into our, armed forces. So we'll get to that eventually if we become more inclusive and things like that.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay, so basically now the K-pop music itself, when the earliest K-pop music, what did it sound like?
Oh, they sounded like, American rock bands,
really,
quite literally,
like pop rock bands.
Yeah, pop rock bands.
Yeah.
I mean, if you guys are talking about, pop rock bands such as, Nickelback, or
it sounded like Nickelback.
No, not Nickelback.
More like Bon Jovi.
Yeah, more like Bon Jovi.
Yeah,
and what else? Rage Against the Machine.
Really?
To give you an idea. Yeah,
wow.
Sateji was quite alike, Rage Against the Machine when it comes to when it comes to his political stance and his worldview and things like that. They were really super, critical about the government's, crackdown on things, and the Korean society's downfall and things like that. We were really super focused on, teaching. I mean, growing up as a kid, I never had that much of a sleep. Sleep deprivation was a thing. Like, wow. I had to sleep 4 to 5 hours a day just to get by, because the study session was so extensive. Yeah. And Sateji was like this godsend to us students, because he was really pushing against the this nature of hyper obsession when it comes to education and things like that. And
yeah, and that's interesting, because here in Korea, there's such an intense focus on education. Kids, they don't just go to their regular school; they go to academies for extra tutoring lessons, and anywhere ranging from math to science to English to piano to taekwondo. It's very common for Korean kids to be in school from like 7 a.m. or 8 a.m. all the way to like 7 p.m. Yeah, it's really quite common in the culture and in the society.
Yeah, I would like to chime in on that. That's part of the reason why a lot of Korean, youngsters back in the day, back in 2000, early 2000, listen to those kind of music, is because they haven't had that much of a time to begin with, so they didn't have any time to go out and play with other youngsters and things like that. Right. So they resorted themselves to just listen to this heavy music and things like that. I must say that back in the day, Korean pop music was really heavy. How should I say it? They sounded like Korn.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That kind of
angry K-pop.
Angry K-pop. Yeah. Those were the thing back in the day.
So K-pop now, K-pop as we know it now has a lot of EDM, electronic dance music, and hip hop influence. When did that started seeping into K-pop and becoming the K-pop that we know now?
I was going to go into that later on this episode, but I'm gonna say it anyway. I should say it started around 2003 to 2007, because 2007 to be precise, because Wonder Girls and Girls' Generation, those were the top girl bands back in the day.
Yeah, so I remember Wonder Girls. They were fun.
They opened for the Jonas Brothers back in the mid-noughties.
Yeah. They had a moment back then. When I was at first year of law school, they were a thing. So anyway, go ahead.
Go ahead, man.
Right. And that's the time period I should give when it comes to, EDM kind of song that happened back then. I was going to get into this, topic more I was going to delve into this topic more. But the reason why Korean pop music in general is hyper focused on sexualization of idols, so-called idols, is because military guys and enlistees, they need a fix. I mean, they need an outlet or some sort of things like that, because they got drafted against their will. So so this is my theory, but the government is actively trying to promote some sort of sexualization of K-pop because of this reason. Because back when I was in the military, we not on a regular basis, but occasionally they were sending those kind of girl bands and not very popular, but those kind of K-pop, pseudo K-pop girl bands, then bring it over and dance in front of us and things like that. So that's something to think about. And another point I was trying to make is that indie scene back in the day was kind of in growth. They were growing up, but because of this one big incident, things really gone sour. How should I say it?
Yeah, the indie, what he means by the indie scene is Korean rock, basically.
Yeah, Korean rock mostly. And KBS, Korean Broadcasting System, gave them a chance, gave this no-name band, and basically gave them a chance to be on a stage and
on
perform.
TV.
Yeah, on TV, live TV performance without any kind of, prior, screening or contact or any kind of thing back then. So it was literally the how should I say it? The definition of live television show.
And what's the name of this band?
They were a no-name band. It was basically they had no names for it. Literally,
they had no name.
They had no names. I'm dead serious. They had no names. they take
Here
it-
is a band.
yeah, and the reason why they were trying to bring in these kind of no-name bands over to their stage is because they wanted to promote the indie scene, because
Yeah.
they wanted to see more of Soteji, they wanted to see more of God,
Right.
and they wanted to show the youngsters that there are alternatives,
Right.
and maybe we can
Alternatives to dance pop.
yeah.
Right.
But they excuse my language, they fucked it up because the indie band, this no-name band, showed up on the stage on live television show and showed their penises, like all of them.
They all dropped their pants and showed their dicks.
Yeah, they all dropped their pants and showed their dicks to the audience, and the studio was in total array. I mean, like you can probably look it up, and the video footage is still there
On YouTube? I gotta check this out.
I mean, I'm not sure if it's on YouTube because it's.
The Korean government probably banned it. Yeah.
Yeah.
이 땅의 정체 또 다른 어린 과사원 이기겠어 지치지 않아 지금도 이렇게 새로운 역사를 만들어 가는데 이렇게
그럼 저희가 머리 숙여 사과드리고요. 나 진심으로 다시 한번 사과 말씀 드리겠습니다.
So what would you search for? Korean punk live television dicks?
Yeah, probably.
So
Yeah.
so they didn't play their instruments. They just like camera on them.
They were at first they were trying to play the instrument and things like that.
Yeah.
It was just a normal thing,
Yeah.
just the usual day. But in the midway, they all drop their pants and give their audience
finger?
middle fingers
And their penises dangling.
and their penis is
Wow.
dangling.
So in the middle of the song, they stopped playing, dropped their guitars, dropped their pants, and gave the middle finger to the cameras.
Funnily enough, guitarists kept playing.
The guitars kept playing.
Yeah, after dropping their pants. I mean, I still vividly remember the video footage of that. I mean, like, yeah.
Jeez.
Anyway, that's
The death knell of Korean rock
Yeah.
is a mainstream thing.
right. So the government really woke up with this feeling that maybe we shouldn't be
Promoting.
allowing these no-name bands and allowing these kids to go out on the stage because they behave like a bunch of
Lunatics.
For what it's worth, I just searched YouTube for that church I just mentioned, and it's not going to be that easy to find it because it's like it basically is all this modern Korean stuff. So
let me look that up. I can
all three of us now have a homework assignment. We need to find this footage of these guys getting their big break on national television and dropping their drawers. While the guitarist stays in character and focuses and actually like does his job. So
They shocked the world without even having a name.
I was gonna say nameless penis. Yeah. There you go.
Anyway, so we digress. So that's the end of serious Korean rock music. Now, around like you said, in the mid-noughties is when EDM and hip hop started infiltrating K-pop, the music stylistically, and to what it's evolved into now. So exactly what did the Korean music industry? I'm sure they worked together with the government to market and export K-pop to other countries, particularly in Southern and Eastern Asia, right?
Yeah. Oh, so I feel like there was a gap. There was an empty gap to fill in for us, I guess. And they were in desperate need of, cultural evolution. I mean, I'm not trying to be on a high horse and say that we were like the saviors when it comes to their culture and things like that. But I'm just stating the fact that there was a, need for, that kind of, pop music. And they were, I'm sure, I know some of the Vietnamese friends, and they told me that, back in the day, they were listening to American, pop music for the most part. But later on, they started listening to K-pop for some reason because all the other friends were listening to. And I really thought to myself, I never asked them why, but I really thought to myself, oh, that is interesting. What may be the reason behind that?
Yeah.
And I feel like because we were Asians just like them,
Yeah.
I think that's probably the reason why they liked our music over American music.
And it's shiny, it's glossy, and
Right.
the girls are beautiful.
Yeah, right.
Don't discount hot girls. Yeah.
Exactly. And this is from my Singaporean friend, and she told me that because being under dictatorship, like back in the 1990s and 80s and 90s, Singaporean people really needed some sort of fix when it comes to culture and pop music and things like that.
Release,
yes. And just like us, because they were under dictatorship back in starting from early 2000 to late 2000, they started listening to K-pop because just like any other Vietnamese people and how should I say it? People from Southeast Asia, they liked K-pop because of our image, not because of our music.
It was because hot women, hot looking guys who look like women.
Yeah,
and I mean that kind of androgyny and sexuality that kind of really sells well in countries like Thailand and Vietnam,
right?
And Cambodia and even Japan. Japan's had that kind of androgynous sexuality.
Yeah, I was going to say anime is about as androgynous as it gets as an art.
Yeah, so like whereas like in conventional society, some of these countries are very strict and conservative, but like behind closed doors, there's a lot of blurred lines. I mean, I've been to Thailand several times. We have a good friend who lives there.
Yeah, I was going to say,
sexuality down there is a very negotiable thing.
Yes, literally negotiable.
Yeah. And anyway, a lot of these Asian countries, they were that really got into K-pop were turned on, like Chan Hyeon said, by the image. The sexuality and the androgyny was something that really, clicked with a lot of these Asian countries. And eventually it started clicking with Western countries as countries like, the United States, Canada, all throughout Europe. We've become, and I say we and me as Western people, like Chris and I, like we've become more as a society, more open to sexual preferences and sexuality expressed in different ways. And this may coincide why K-pop has started to make inroads in North America and Europe. And so I guess the Korean music industry, and I would say aided by the Korean government, did a really good promotional marketing job. Knowing this, they probably are really smart about it. And they knew that it was eventually going to crack. And they've tried cracking the US market many times. And I think it didn't really start cracking until 2013 or 2012 with a certain 30-something-year-old, kind of past his prime at the time, K-pop star named Psy. Yeah, Gangnam Style was the first major K-pop hit. And that's the big bang moment for K-pop in the Western world.
And that was a fun song and even funner video for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
So I must say, like my Singaporean friend explained before, there was an empty gap to fill in, and alternative was needed for them. And Koreans were regarded as somewhat friendlier compared to American pop scene and things like this. I don't know how, but they thought of us like somewhat likable, I guess. And government took this as a sign that can be.
We can exploit this.
Yeah. And they really, they drop the hammer down and they pull out the active measures to ensure success in the Southeast Asian market. And not only in South Asian market, Middle East and Japan and China and all over the nations. And
sex sells, and they just pumped up the sexual quotient, basically.
Yeah, right. For the money. I mean, like I said before, our country was in shambles. We don't have natural resources. I mean, most of the natural resources are in North Korea. So South Korea only has like, some sort of infrastructure and manpower. So what can we do? We can resort to, either we can be educationally genius and, or maybe we can, sell sex or, some goods and, produce
sell their culture.
Yeah, sell their culture.
Yeah.
To put it lightly.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's partly the reason why South Asian market opened up for us.
And then eventually that strategy translated to the Western world as the Western, like I said earlier, as Western countries started to become a little more open to that kind of glossy sexuality. And boom, all of a sudden now we got BTS. On this episode, Chris and I got to the bottom of the K-pop explosion. For the next episode, we'll get to the bottom of another pop culture phenomenon that has been ongoing since the mid-1960s, covers of Bob Dylan songs. The Bard's Songbook has been a source of material for bands and artists of all genres and spectrums for more than half a century. Chris and I will give our choices for the 10 most interesting, if not the best, Dylan covers. Email us at curmudgeonrock@gmail.com or hit us on Twitter at curmudgeonpod.
I don't think our approach when it comes to, breaking the wall of Western market has changed.
Okay.
I feel like Western market has changed.
Right. That's what I said earlier. Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
Because, I mean, the strategy that the Korean music industry, with the help from the government, is like, okay, we're just going to do our thing and we're going to wait for those countries to change. And once they changed, boom, they went right through the door.
Right. I feel like American society has changed quite a bit in the past couple of decades, and they became more open and more inclusive and things like that. And it's partly the reason why we were successful back in early 2010, I guess. And with the help of YouTube and other media outlets coverage, we were able to finally crack the Western market. But I'm going to, stop here, and I'm going to explain this later on with more extensive detail.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's basically it. Yeah. And what's the extensive detail? Go for it.
Right here?
Yeah, go for it.
Well, Psy Gangnam Style being the first knock on the Western market back in 2012.
Yep.
And it's largely due to the fact that their, music video got published on YouTube, and it was super funny. And because Psy was like a nobody in my perspective. Yeah. I mean, he wasn't even that great back in the day. He
wasn't even that big in Korea.
Yeah, right, exactly. And do you guys know the fact that he had to enlist 2 times in the military?
Why?
Because so here's the deal. When he first enlisted, there was no, registration or some sort of, official, thing to prove that he enlisted. So after he got discharged, or soon after he got back into the musical industry, he got informed that, come back here, you're gonna have to serve in our military again. What the fuck? Why? And
he was older at this point.
Yeah, he was like early 30s. So most of the Korean enlistees in the military are in their early 20s. So
19, 20.
Yeah. I was going to say there's a comedy. There's a Chris Farley movie in there somewhere. Poor guy.
But anyway, so Psy broke through with that song, even Gangnam Style.
Right.
And then after that,
After that, we just kept going, and JYP and some other musical industry giants really pushed out to the Western market with Wonder Girls and Girls' Generation, and I gotta be honest, we were really, frankly, surprised that we were successful in the Western market, especially in America, because the sentiment there is so different from Asian market.
Mhm.
So yeah, and I don't think K-pop's approach has been changed. Like I said before, I think the market's been changed,
Yeah.
and because of the fact that America politically and economically has changed quite a lot culturally, and that's partly the not partly the predominantly the reason
I agree.
why
Yeah.
we were successful there.
Yeah.
And BTS being the
The
latest
prime example.
yeah, prime example of that. It really broke down the wall, and not only in America but throughout the world. It's hitting the big leagues, I must say.
Yeah, BTS is one of the biggest groups in the world. And
Yeah, they really are.
For Chris and I, our generation, we're old guys, in our 40s. We think BTS, we think of the classic indie rock band Built to Spill.
Yeah, exactly.
And all of a sudden, BTS is getting big. It's like, what?
Yeah,
finally. Oh no, not that BTS.
Yeah, that did mess with me for a little bit. I will say this though, as part of this episode, I did explore BTS a little bit more deeply than I have, and I was kind of stunned. They're actually pretty good. I mean, they're these 7 androgynous guys, but for anybody out there that's ambitious, go out there on YouTube. They have a cover of Coldplay's "Fix You" that is astonishingly good. Those guys can sing. And then obviously they're as they get bigger, they're become kind of like a Backstreet Boys manufacturing, like an assembly line, so they can get all the good writers and all the good producers. But yeah,
they're the biggest boy band since NSYNC.
So I got to give it up for them. But yeah, the rest of it still kind of sucks. It's like Detroit house music as done by NSYNC, which is. Sorry, everybody. I'm not supposed to say that word. Send hate mail to curmudgeonrock@gmail.com. Thank you.
Yeah, that interesting that you say that Korean cancel culture is part of the thing. And now, starting from here, I'm going to talk about the negatives about the Korean pop
K-pop
scene and things like that. Cancel culture is a thing. So whenever somebody talks shit about the boy bands or girl bands they like, they're literally gonna go after you.
Yeah,
like
how dare you criticize our K-pop idols?
I'm dead serious. They're gonna come for you. Like in Korea, they got this cancel culture, and they will be they're gonna do anything they've got at their proposal to make your life miserable when it comes to
that's also social media and bullying. Social media bullying is a big thing, and that's how they do it. That's how they. For me, someone like me who's not really on social media, I barely use Facebook. I only use it really for text messaging. I don't do Twitter. I don't do Instagram. So that shit has no effect on me. Like this podcast that we're doing right now is as close to social media as I ever get.
yeah, pretty much. And me, I mean, so I have to use LinkedIn and Twitter professionally every day, and I use Facebook less than I do. Twitter's interesting. Twitter, that's where the most bullying happens, but that's also where the most informative stuff, and that's where like the best interactions happen too.
Yeah.
But anyway, I digress. You were saying, sir.
Yeah, you were saying. Go ahead.
And most of the youngsters nowadays, they got access to 98% of Korean population are literate, and they got they got their cell phones and internet connections, and pretty much everyone has their internet connection. So these youngsters really digging into their boy bands, they're gonna come after you whenever they say something bad about them. And there was this incident back in 2017, I believe. It was not only because of the boy band, because the perpetrator was largely mentally unstable,
mentally disabled,
unstable.
Mental health issues. Okay.
Yeah, mental health issues. So there were like 2 girls, and they one girl talked shit about some bands. GOT7. Yeah, that was the name of the boy band, and they talked shit about it, and they came after her and basically chopped her up into pieces and threw them into the sewer or something.
Good
like
Lord.
That. Yeah, those are the things that are happening when it comes to the K-pop
obsession.
the K-pop obsession and things like that. And cancel culture is largely at hand to that. And what other things I would like to mention? Like I said before, over-sexualization. We're following Japan's trend when it comes to pop culture. I should have really mentioned this before, because back in 1980s and 1990s, we were first, Japan got influenced by American culture, American pop scene, and they largely adopted that. And after that, we basically just imported the same stuff. So, it's called a city pop, and we were listening to those type of music back in the day. And later on, Japan really started, these over-sexualization of idols, and and we somehow just follow suit. Like I explained before, this is largely due to the fact that government stopped cracking down. But I must say, it was an interesting, thing to witness. And because of that, a lot of, Korean, girls in their late teens, how should I say, teenagers, they join in musical labels, and they pour their hearts and soul into, becoming the next big thing. But at the end of the day, their future, some took off. Like, for example, 1 or 2 girl bands out of 100, maybe they can take off. But rest of the people who pour their hearts and soul into it, they just get exploited.
Yeah.
And
Interesting.
they end up as a sex worker and things like that. That kind of bad thing happened. So
it never dawned on me until you said that even though a lot of those guys look like girls, they're all guys. And so I never really realized that there was that kind of misogyny that runs through it.
Oh yeah, in the Korean record industry, like a lot of, there have been rumors, but a lot of especially the girl pop groups that, and even maybe even some of the boy pop groups.
Yeah,
that,
it wouldn't surprise me. Yeah.
Rumors of like sexual favors having to be done in order for promotion.
Right.
Let's face it, dude. It shouldn't be shocking because the same shit exists in the American record industry.
In some respects,
it shouldn't be shocking.
Oh, what was the name of the movie director? Harvey
Weinstein.
Harvey Weinstein. Yeah, that guy's a pig and a half.
Deal. Yeah, it's kind of the same deal. Just like in Hollywood, we're living in a small country, so everything is super hyper focused and super connected. So there's no escape from that.
When
exactly.
It comes
to entertainment,
but I'm sure, but the same thing in the UK music scene, same thing. I'm sure there's a lot of sexual favors were done there. In order for certain pop acts, male and female, to get big. It's just. Unfortunately, it's unfortunately part of the business, in some sectors, But anyway, cyberbullying and sexual corporate favors, the dark side of K-pop and other areas of pop music as well.
And other areas of pop music, Korean pop music scene has this weird trend that has people follow their celebrities,
celebrities,
celebrities, to their teeth. It's Korean expression, but basically what people do is that they follow the boy band members or some sort of celebrity they like, and they follow all the way to their house. They figure out their phone number. They figure out their home addresses and things like that.
The fan obsession. That's not new.
That's not new, but it's on a whole new level when they place a hidden camera inside their apartment, things like that.
Good Lord!
Right? It's a reality.
It's 21st century fan obsession. Before
Right.
when it was like teenage girls shrieking and fainting, seeing the Beatles and throwing their panties at them. Now it's like, I want to break into their home and put a camera in their
Right.
home.
And live broadcast and things like
Yeah.
that. Live stream. It's just
Yeah.
crazy out there.
Yeah.
To take this home, Chan Hyeon, where do you see K-pop going in the next 5 years? I mean, is it something that's going to become like Saturday morning, like kind of like Menudo is to Puerto Rico? I mean, are you going to start seeing like these, like even like the most electronic and sort of studly of these guys? Are they going to start playing for audiences of 7-year-olds on cartoon
Interesting that
shows?
you asked that. I mean, I don't think, like I said before, our sentiment has been changed. The market has been changed. I think our approach when it comes to selling K-pop music in general won't be changed largely due to the fact that we're doing so well in these days. And I feel like in the next 5 years or so, I think we're gonna see more growth when it comes to K-pop music, and the nature won't be changed at all. And deep down inside, we believe in the fact that sexualization is what made us successful in the
It's what
first place.
drove it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's what drove it, and
Yeah.
the image quality and
Yeah, how about that?
Basically, K-pop music in general it's pretty conservative by nature. You won't get experimental psychedelic art rock in K-pop.
Yeah.
It's pretty much it's going to stay with the EDM hip hop.
Arturo is largely against streaming services and other media outlets and things like that. But I'm really happy that YouTube and Spotify and other media
I use
outlets
YouTube all the time. I'm a big YouTube guy.
Yeah, but you are against the Spotify streaming.
Yeah,
services.
yeah. Well, mainly because I like to download for free. That's just my thing.
Yeah.
I like to actually have the digital files in my possession. I don't like to depend on the internet in case the internet breaks up and I'm listening to something. All of a sudden, I can't listen to it anymore because the internet's not good, or the internet connection is not good.
Arturo and I and our good friend Ruben talked about this intensively a week ago, and I'm really happy that Spotify and YouTube, streaming services are allowing indie bands to join the big leagues.
Yeah,
I mean,
sure.
it takes little to no effort to put out a video, and more than that, it takes no money to actually, produce, that kind of, musical piece.
Sure.
Yeah,
sure.
I mean, it's all bedroom EDM.
YouTube is the new MTV.
Yeah, it really
Right.
is. And Spotify, to your point, Sean Hyung. So I'm looking at Spotify now, and Arturo knows I rely on Spotify for a lot of my musical streaming. And so let's just say, like, there's the band EXO, which I guess is sort of they're not they're not what we think of here in America, but I know that they're popular in Korea. Their song "Love Shot," 157,707,676 listens for a band that most of us in America have not heard of. Now, another stat, and then we'll get back to this discussion. So you mentioned "Dynamite" by BTS. That let me just click them on. That is up to 872,848,639 listens, and then even like some of their lesser stuff, like a song called "Film Out," has like 60 million plus listens. So yeah, the distribution and the way that these bands are hooking on through Spotify and YouTube is incredible.
Yeah, EXO is the second biggest K-pop group after BTS, according to Wikipedia, and I'm reading this right now. They've made a lot of money for their management agency, which is SM Entertainment. Apparently, I think it was 2018, they generated the highest revenue of all SM artists. They recorded the largest ever quarterly profit for any South Korean entertainment company at 13.4 million. That's their management company. So basically the success of EXO, it tells you where we are in the 21st century. The success of EXO is measured as how much money they make for their management company.
Yeah.
not so much the quality of their music.
Which is just kind of ironic because this kind of goes back to the hit making machines of the 50s and
Yes.
60s, right? I mean,
Yeah,
so there's
yeah,
definitely
exactly.
a parallel there. So and
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
interesting. And one last question for you, Jung Hyung, before we end the segment. Who are some of the indie bands and some of the K-pop bands that our listeners may not have heard of that we should check out?
Particularly the indie meaning rock.
Gate Flowers.
Gay as in Gay.
Gay. It's
Gate
like
Flowers.
Gate Flowers.
Oh, Gate. Gate. Gate Flowers.
not Gate Flowers.
Not Gate Flowers. Gate Flowers.
Gate Flowers.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they're this rock band. They took off in 2016 to 2017. I've been listening to them quite a lot, and their honorable mention could be Yebiyo, like reserved army and things like that.
Right,
I mean, I
right.
listened to that song quite a lot when I was in the military because I really wanted to just get out of there and be the reserved personnel. You
Right.
know, like when you finish your military service, you're never finished. And
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
talk about the life after the military service and how their life's never going to be the same when it comes to the,
Yeah.
military service.
I can mention a Korean band, but they're I guess what we would call post rock. They're a band called Jambinai, and they put out their first album in 2012 called Difference. It's a really good record. Basically, they take old traditional Korean folk music, especially like the kind of stuff you play on a gayagum. It's kind of like a guitar type instrument that's a traditional Korean folk instrument, and they take old traditional Korean folk and they just marry it to like heavy metal and post rock, and it's really heavy and really badass. Their 2016 album, A Hermitage, is the one that I highly recommend. Fantastic record. But yeah, if you're into like weirdo hybrid shit of like, traditional Korean folk with heavy metal and post rock, think like, think of Mogwai. They're kind of like in that Mogwai realm.
Yeah.
They're really good.
Yeah,
Jambinai.
they definitely sound similar to them.
Yeah, they're interesting, and just for what it's worth, they are on Spotify, and that's for all of you at home. That's spelled JAM as in Mary, B as in boy, N as in Nancy, AI.
Yeah, Jambinai. Anyway, so we went from K-pop to basically, other non-K-pop music. And I think we're pretty much done there. Thank you, Chan Hyeon, for giving us the brief rundown, and the good and the bad, the facts about K-pop, explaining to us why it's popular and what its appeal, its international appeal, not just in Korea, but to East and South Asia, as well as nowadays just the Western world in general. And
and you've definitely given us a lot to think about. So thank you so much, man. We really appreciate it. You are now an officially unofficial curmudgeon. Yeah. All right, so we now go from our excellent discussion of modern K-pop into the deep recesses of the vaults of the curmudgeons, namely Christopher O'Connor and Arturo Andrade. This is where we venture back into the past and pick out an album of interest and kind of a public service, but also stuff that actually might be on our radars at any given moment. And so, Arturo, you have entered your vault this week. What have you pulled out?
Yeah, this is one of my favorite bands of the noughties. Noughties meaning the 2000s, before the year 2010. This is a Vancouver, British Columbia, Canadian band called Black Mountain and their amazing album from 2008, In the Future. Chan Hyeon's a big fan of Black Mountain as well. I think I turned him onto it a few years ago. Formed and fronted by singer-songwriter and guitarist Stephen McBean, who toiled for years in the 1990s through various bands in the Vancouver music scene. They emerged in 2005 with their self-titled debut that immediately garnered critical praise for their marriage of Black Sabbath-esque heavy 70s rock and raw, droning Velvet Underground-inspired art rock with shades of psychedelia and progressive rock. Such was the buzz surrounding them that it got them a lucrative gig opening for Coldplay, of all bands, for 3 weeks during Coldplay's Twisted Logic tour of 2005. However, it was Black Mountain's follow-up in 2008 that, in my opinion, truly cemented their status as one of the best North American bands on the planet, a distinction they held up until only a few years ago. While expanding on and bringing out the prog rock strains in their music would usually elicit nothing but derision from yours truly. In McBean and Company's hands, it comes off like a much more guitar heavy, much more disciplined, much less indulgent Pink Floyd with a much bigger set of balls. Imagine 1971 to 75 era Floyd, corralled and smothered by Soundgarden and sprinkled with a little Melvin's weirdness. This kind of music can easily fall into 1970s rock pastiche, but it avoids that due to exquisitely tight songwriting, soaring melodies, an angry grunge edge. After all, Stephen McBean did come up in the 90s and an immaculately crafted sense of build-up, space, tension release dynamics that permeates every track. Lyrically and vocally, when McBean isn't espousing a dystopian future where oligarchs rule the world with a totalitarian grip and launch countries into endless wars, especially appropriate during the time when this album came out, because it was the raging wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Amber Weber, who was at this time a member of the band, her haunting Hope Sandoval on creepy drugs vocals, power songs such as the super tense Queens Will Play, with her exhortations of blood crawling over and permeating all of existence. Yeah, they were that kind of band.
Yes, they were.
McBean has always been a busy man with his side projects, such as the goth folk excursion of Grim Tower and the Black Mountain Light venture of Pink Mountaintops. But he came back to Black Mountain with 2010's Wilderness Heart, which saw the band streamline their sound a bit and delve more into something akin to a more concise, catchy, appealing take on doom metal. A long hiatus followed, with the band emerging with their fourth album, aptly titled 4 in Roman numerals, in 2016. This album is a latter-day, under-recognized rock classic that takes In the Future's expansive, spacey prog rock and ratchets it up with sprawling psychedelia, beautiful molten lava guitar, and subtle electronic dance beats. McBean would soon fire the whole band, hire new members, maintain the Black Mountain name, and release Destroyer in 2019 to mild critical response and much more tepid fan response due to the album's conventional, cliche, old-school metal sound that isn't too far removed from Iron Maiden. Yeah, it fucking sucked. Nevertheless, Black Mountain have established a lot of credit with serious rock and serious rock fans, and they have the leeway to put out a dud every now and then due to the brilliant run of their first 4 albums, especially the unearthly masterpiece that is In the Future.
so this is a weird one, and there was a period, like seems like lately. This is the second time in the last handful of episodes I've pulled from this well. There was a period of about 99 and 2000 where there were these indie record owning geeks and these digging in the crates types and collegiate students that were looking at old tapes and were just like searching for stuff out there, and they managed to pull quite a few acts that were and artists and even like music teachers that were doing really cool and interesting stuff in the 70s that never saw the light of day. Now all of a sudden they get their opportunity to shine through music stores like Other Music in New York, which Arturo and I both frequented, RIP, or Amoeba, which I believe is still around. But
yes, Amoeba's still there.
Yeah, probably holding on by a thread. But record stores like that. And so this is one of those acts. So we're talking about the JPT Scare Band. And okay, so the story here is the JPT Scare Band is these three dudes. They're buddies from Kansas City. There's drummer Jeff Luttrell. There's bassist Paul Grigsby. And then there's singer, guitarist, songwriter Terry Swope. Hey, JPT, get it? Which is interesting because this is really Terry Swope's band. I mean, this guy is, he's the star of this group. So anyway, so they're a local trio that's kicking around in the early 70s, and they are clearly influenced by the psychedelic blues of the late 60s and early 70s, and also of the sort of the guitar composition guys. So, think Hendrix and Clapton and Jeff Beck and Frank Zappa and these guys that were, basically the lead singer, the shredder guys, the sort of the psychedelic blues guys. And they would do these shows, and they did a lot of acetate creations and reel-to-reel stuff in their basements, and they played around Kansas City and, sort of the suburbs in and around Kansas City for years. They never went anywhere. They were never discovered, really never left it, and they never stopped jamming. And so now these two guys, who I guess I've seen an article that refers to them as rock anthropologists, which I find is funny because basically that just means they're nerds. They were nerds with a record company, and they came across these old records. There were these two vinyl performances that these guys put together from the 70s, and they have these wonderfully wise-ass druggy names. One was called Acid Acetate Excursion, and and the other was called Rape of the Titan Sirens.
Rape
of the Titan Sirens, and
Jesus.
and so this is I think it's 8 songs total on 2 vinyls. And these guys are like, oh my goodness, we need to put this out. And so what they did is they rolled up these 2 little vinyl records into one CD that was called Sleeping Sickness, after what ends up being the lead track on this record. And let me tell you, we discovered this, Arturo and I, back in 2000, and Other Music. Other Music, whoever was their main curator or wrote their little reviews, was wonderful because they were really good at describing stuff, and stuff I would have never bought in a million years. I bought just based on those bios. And
me too.
we get this, and I'm telling you, this may be one of the greatest recordings ever released for people who like to smoke hydroponic weed, sit back in an armchair, and listen to a guy solo his balls off for 10 minutes at a time. I mean, it's tremendous. The maestro here is that guy, Terry Swope. Again, he wrote all the songs. He's the singer. He's the guitarist. Clearly influenced. And so the exercise is basically, it's his rhythm section going, and then him just going to town for, anywhere between 8 and 13 minutes. And, there's some really fun song titles on this that are, totally indicative of these guys that are just bashing the fuck out in a basement in 1973. I mean, there's Sleeping Sickness. There's the Slow Sick Shuffle. There's King Rat, which is my favorite song on this thing. It's 13 minutes, but it is loud as fuck. It is just this really just grouchy, crunchy, gnarly, bash out, just pure like rock bliss riff with this like wacky soloing running alongside of it, and just it's incredibly psychedelic, and it just bashes out, and it goes on for 13 minutes. And so, needless to say, when they released the Sleeping Sickness CD, Rape of the Titan Sirens was conspicuously absent. Or, obviously conspicuously absent. So, like I said, this album, again, it's like 70 minutes of nonstop bash out and just jamming. I mean, just like prodigious, just like 3-piece jamming with Terry Swope in your face. I mean, this is a guy that if he had gotten lucky enough to have the right guy in the audience at the right time, probably would have been out there as a radio god, or at least he should have been. He was that good of an axe wielder. So, so the rest of the story here is kind of amusing. So these guys get their discovery, and they're out there, and it's like, oh boy, now we have a chance to cash in. And so they try to convince these 2 guys from Monster Records that found them to, hey, put out our new stuff or put out our other stuff. And those guys were like, well, this shit kind of sucks. And so they backed off. And so JP&T said, you know what? Screw those guys. We're going to put out our own shit. And so they formed a label with the wonderful name Kung Bomar. I don't understand it. Why not Kung Fu? It's Kung Bomar, or at least they could have done Kung Fu Mar or Fubar. How about Kung Fu Bar? That would have been better. So that's their imprint. And in 2002, they released an album called Past is Prologue, which has 3 or 4 new songs. And then they go back to the old acetates for the rest of it. And so it's kind of like, it's interesting. So they slap on Sleeping Sickness. They slap on a couple of the other old songs. But, the first 3 tracks, they're very Sabbathy. They're very drony and very heavy on that. And lo and behold, a truncated version of Rape of the Titan Sirens comes on. They're just called Titan Sirens, but it's basically a 4.5-minute carve out from that. And so they did get their moment, and that album sort of became an underground hit for the prog metal fans out there. And so it's grown in stature over the years. There's a cult behind that record. It's weird. It's more of a cult behind Past is Prologue than there is Sleeping Sickness. But Sleeping Sickness is the fascinating one because it's like from their basement to our ears.
I think this is the first time in our Vault segment that we've produced 2 bands that really should go on tour together.
Yes.
Because,
Yeah.
I mean, because their music, they aren't that far removed from each other.
Let's just put it this way. In some other planet out there, there's the equivalent of Old Faithful in Yellowstone. These guys definitely spring from the same geyser.
Like once touring gets underway, I think Black Mountain should reconvene and ask JPT Scare Band to come on the road and open for them.
Yeah. Our mascot is Terry Swope. Come out here, Terry. Wow, 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 wow. Okay. So on that note, I believe we are now exiting the vault. This has been a fantastic episode of the Curmudgeon Rock Report. I really feel like we've done a public service here.
Yeah,
and so
we're educating people about K-pop.
And so, Chan Hyeon Park, thank you very much.
For having me.
We really needed to ask a Korean dude, and you came through in the clutch. So we much appreciate that. And so we have come here to the end, and we thank everybody for listening. If you have any fan mail or any thoughts, hit us up at curmudgeonrock@gmail.com. We are on Twitter at curmudgeonpod. We're planning to get more aggressive, and so we're going to be doing some clever things with mini episodes and promotions and chunking some things up. Those longtime listeners will remember a Kate Bush rant that Arturo went on, so we want to feature that. And so
I think my Def Leppard rant was pretty damn good from last episode.
Yeah. Arturo knows how to rant. Me, I'm pretty good at like more sort of cosmic and sort of what would you call it, hypnotic stuff. But he's the funny one. Me, I'm the talkative one. He's the funny one. The Curmudgeon Rock Report will keep on rocking if you do. Catch us where you catch all the podcasts. We know you love rock and roll as much as we do. Support us with donations at patreon.com/curmudgeonrock. Find show notes and more on our Medium site. Join us next time as rock nerds smack you with knowledge. Stay rude, stay crude, stay sophisticated. Thank you for listening.